There has been so much that has been revealed as of late with Trump's administration, but it really, there's so much information that we already know. What needs to happen is information needs to get out there, because now we have access, now that we have power to do something about it like we didn't have before. And so we have a guest today, Kelly Walker. He's going to come from a certain perspective, a certain angle on this information that we knew what was happening, but we couldn't do anything because our hands were tied. And in a lot of ways, we were being censored online. We're definitely being censored from the mainstream corporate corrupt, land of make-believe, satanic Decepticon mainstream media, always trying to dumb down the public and crush the truth. But now it is time that we move forward. In my opinion, we have a very sensitive, very fragile republic that can maneuver, because I think what the elite are going to do, and this is just theory, is they're going to do something, crash the economy, and blame now the Trump and all of MAGA. So that's why I truly feel that they are playing possum. They're kind of waiting for something to happen. But in the lull, this is where we need to get the truth out like never before, because the public is listening. And this subject today, it's very close to me. It's very important to me, and I think the Tucson community and the country at large. We're going to be talking about the persecuted parents, specifically from the COVID lockdowns. The parents were being persecuted. The students were being persecuted, coming from the top down. And we need to air this out, because they are surely not going to do it again like they did it before. And the best way to do that is get the truth out there. Thank you so much, Kelly Walker, for joining us today. Tell us about your story. Tell us specifically about your angle, and then we'll get into more about what we're going to do about it. But Kelly, go ahead.
Sure, Michael. Well, it's great to be on the best of times and worst of times. It's great to know that this is going to be heard in Tucson, because as you know, we had a small coffee shop, Viva Coffee House, there, and we opened it, unfortunately for us, shortly before the lockdowns. And we experienced something that I had known about, because at the time I was working as editor-in-chief for a national medical publication. However, the way I saw this managed and handled was completely unscientific. So in short, our coffee shop became this haven for people where they were treated like adults, where they could choose to mask or non-mask. We wanted them to respect our other customers' decisions. And we got attacked first by Pima County, and I got arrested and handcuffed at a Board of Supervisors meeting. And that started the persecution. But what I really want to focus on is the targeting of school parents, the weaponization of the federal government against parents. Because believe it or not, and I was surprised when I learned this, all of that started in Vail, Arizona. And it's not to say other things weren't going on, because at the same time, Loudoun County, Virginia, parents were having issues with their school boards. But what happened in Vail, Arizona was, according to FOIA documents that I've received and the dates and the timeline, which we're going to go over, really that is where I believe John Carruth from the Vail School District got in touch with the National School Board Association. Merrick, Garland, and the Biden administration got involved. And then the FBI started hunting, monitoring, profiling parents, and local law enforcement, the school district, Pima County, collaborated in that. So fortunately, there are some very key people who are going to watch this. This is going to be given directly to Kash Patel, Pam Bondi. It's going to be handed to President Trump as well, at least in a written form. So this is all going to come out in its due time. And I have been up to Washington, D.C. more than once to talk with members of Congress about this. So these people are already being investigated, and we're going to see this through. And you're going to see how devastating this was on people's lives. The youth suicide was covered up because the school districts were getting money, and you're going to see what they did to our family and others as well. So I'm going to go ahead and start with a little bit of video. I'm going to be putting clips in as we go. This is from one of several appearances I've had on the Eric Metaxas show, and it really gives you quickly the scenario.
Government targeted innocent parents who are trying to be advocates for their children.
September 29th, 2021, the National School Board Association sent a letter to Joe Biden asking for federal assistance dedicated to these dangerous parents, and this whole domestic terrorist narrative came about. By October 4th, Merrick Garland issued the memo designating parents as domestic terrorists. Then October 18th, there was a letter by 14 attorneys general sent to Garland and Biden citing this National School Board Association letter as a massive fraud. 1 week ago, in a letter dated October 18th, 2021, my fellow attorneys general and I laid out the facts surrounding the massive fraud that the National School Board Association has perpetrated on the American people. In a letter to the Department of Justice, NSBA accused parents throughout the United States of, quote, domestic terrorism and hate crimes, warranting the invocation of the Patriot Act in regards to domestic terrorism.
We've never seen it in our lifetimes until the nonsense of COVID and the masking and the mandates started to happen. Nobody had ever seen anything like this in our lifetimes. We would never dream that mayors and governors could be so wicked, that school boards could be so wicked. Really the ugly underbelly of our fellow Americans. We saw it, and it's hideous.
So this sort of sets the stage to what happened. And Michael, we're going to talk about why this happened, what the parents did, how the parents reached out for help. And parents were coming, and kids coming to our coffee shop saying, look, these COVID policies are leading to our kids committing suicide, having mental health issues, physical health issues. You're going to see some of that. And in the meantime, I was writing all about this. I'm a researcher. I have a Master of Science degree. I'm a professional researcher. And I knew all this to be true. The data was out there even at that time. So there's really no excuse for people to say, well, we were just doing the best we could with the information at hand. And you're going to see that I presented this information to the Vail School District, and they ignored it because they were getting millions of dollars.
Yeah, it's so interesting. We know right now that when it comes to the elite, when it comes to the globalists, they're going to they have and will continue to make parents specifically the enemy. They will badmouth them in the media. We see it all over movies and TV shows. They have got to make the parents the enemy. They also need to make good teachers the ones who would speak out against this, the ones who would advocate for us. They got to minimalize them too. One, they got to gut them out, and then two, they got to silence them. That's why it's so important we talk about this today. Go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah, and there are within the Vail School District, even high up, there are whistleblowers who came forward to me and agreed with us, and it went against their conscience. So if anybody's listening to this or watching it and you know about these things, you work for the district, you're a teacher, I encourage you to contact me. Go to realfreedomtalk@gmail.com or send me a message through social media. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, @realfreedomtalk, and other platforms as well. But I'm going to play a couple of clips, first from Christian Broadcasting Network, national news, talking about this crisis and how the lockdown policies led to suicide. And I wrote peer-reviewed, scholarly articles footnoted about how the lockdowns were putting kids who were abused, trapping them in abusive situations, not to mention the isolation, the loss of prestige, the loss of education. So let's go ahead and play a couple clips.
When public schools shut down last year, millions of homes became virtual classrooms. Students became anxious, disinterested, and isolated, unable to truly interact with friends and teachers. The result? A pandemic within a pandemic, as some struggled to find answers or a way out. Seidel recalled the moment she learned about her son's suicide, shortly after leaving him at his dad's.
He sent me a text after I'd already dropped him off. I just freaked out and drove back to his house, and by that time it was too late.
An honor student who had just transitioned to high school, Michael struggled with virtual learning when COVID shut down his school.
The response to the virus has been worse than the virus itself for our younger people. They get a break from whatever may be going on or the stressors at home.
So I'm getting these reports every day saying your kid's failing. Michael's like, I turned it in. And there's, this pressure building inside of him where I'm literally freaking out thinking my kid is going to fail. By that time, he was already 30 assignments behind.
And this family isn't alone, as medical and education experts continue to warn about the negative impact of school closures. According to Mental Health America, 2020's rate of children ages 11 through 17 screened for anxiety and depression jumped 9% over the previous year. CDC data also shows emergency room treatment for kids with mental health conditions skyrocketed from April to October last year.
Now, you might think, okay, this was national, but how much did they know in Pima County? How much did they know in Arizona? Here's a local clip. We'll give you an idea. And all of this is from that time. These aren't recent clips.
The Pima County Health Department reports 23 suicides over the last couple of months, and 3 of those minors.
If we see a spike in a month or a week or a day, we're going to investigate it. And if we think it's something that is alert worthy, we'll send it out in the hopes that providers will be able to do something in the moment to stop it.
Program manager Mark Person with the Pima County Health Department says this new spike in suicides was first reported at the start of the pandemic. In this graphic from the health department, you could see the increase in week-to-week numbers from February to March. The sharpest increase was 15 suicides within 14 days.
Michael, they knew this in 2020, and as early as 2019, I was writing scholarly articles about this that were shared with physicians, healthcare providers around the country. So really, there are any number of clips like this. Pima County Health Department had the data. So I'm wondering, why did Pima County support these kinds of policies?
And it's incredible, like that reporter said, pandemic in a pandemic. That is what's happening here. And just not enough is being talked about the ramifications of these actions, reactions. Of course, we can get into the vaccine and all the truth and reality that's coming out. I think it was Woody Harrelson that even came out recently and really was slamming Fauci. But pandemic in a pandemic, that's really what was occurring in real time. And of course, anybody who spoke out against it, anybody who reacted in a way that was contrary to the narrative that was being put out there was demonized. They must be a terrorist. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I used some of the same language. In fact, co-wrote an article that I titled Pandemic Abuse. I wrote it with a fellow named Timothy Highland, who's been published in the Washington Times and other publications. Since that time, I've worked really hard. I've been published in Washington Times and a lot of other publications. But if you can imagine, Michael, you're running a business, people are coming to you desperate for help. You have parents crying on your shoulder. We had a kid in our neighborhood go out in the desert and shoot himself. And in a little bit, I'm going to tell you more of the story behind that, because it's absolutely shocking. So put yourself in my place and my wife's place, and people are coming to you asking for help. What are you going to do, especially if you're a Christian? Are you going to pass by on the other side? Are you going to hide and say, well, sorry for you, I'm just going to save my own skin? Absolutely not. We stepped forward. It was never about me, never about trying to get publicity. In fact, well, here we are in 2025. We've lost our house, our savings. We're living in exile, essentially. This has been a very huge sacrifice. And so I'm going to play a little bit longer clip here that's going to tell some of the story. You're going to see clips from back at that time. You're going to see how I tried so very hard to get the information out there and help these parents.
We have been telling the school district for months and months that we have a mental health crisis. In our neighborhood, a 13-year-old boy walked out in the desert near our home and blew his brains out. The moment you react, you're vilified, you're demonized. And I'll tell you something, we, a little coffee shop, we had people coming to us saying, our kids are committing suicide because of these policies, because they're being isolated and ostracized, because in some cases they can't medically wear a mask.
I've suffered from migraines, but ever since I've been wearing a mask, it started to happen more often.
Many students are mentally challenged and they feel, they panic when they wear one, and sometimes they even slobber, and which causes the mask to mold, and this can cause many diseases from that, like strep throat. Personally, I have chronic acne, and I have to wear medication on my face. And when I wear a mask, the medication tends to melt, and it runs into my nose and mouth. And I've tried to talk to teachers about me not wearing one, and they just tell me it's policy and I have to wear one no matter what.
Then people come to me and say, I'm deaf or hearing impaired. I'm depressed because now my world is completely silent. I've had people come and say, I was abused and raped and a hand held over my face and I can't tolerate something on my face. That's what happened at Micah Mountain. A boy jumped off the top of the bleachers and killed himself. A boy had a speech that he wanted to give about his classmate and tell them what they're doing. And he was denied the ability to speak because they shut down that meeting. And then they portrayed us as violent and hostile. Over 200 parents came to speak, to say, you are hurting our children.
In Vail last night when a group of parents spoke out over the school district still requiring their kids to mask up there at the school. There was supposed to be a board meeting that was canceled just a few minutes before it was set to begin.
And that's when things really got heated with the parents. News for Tucson's Eric Fink was there and brings us the latest.
Let our children breathe!
Aloud.
And they do not have the right to take this away from us. These are our kids.
An at times angry group of parents making their way inside school district headquarters in Vail Tuesday night after a board meeting was canceled.
And they have the audacity to leave when we come here as peaceful parents to talk to them?
I understand what you're saying, but I have These are my rights as a parent, and they don't get to decide how I choose to raise them and what I believe is true and factual. It's disgusting what's being done, and I don't agree with it. I don't. I'm frustrated that my children are being forced to wear a mask every day for 7 to 8 hours with very few breaks, like when they get to eat, and it's not okay anymore.
Pima County Sheriff's deputies called out to try and keep the peace.
The smaller portion that likes to be louder than the others. But I believe the school district does a great job of hearing and putting the concern and safety of everyone.
It's this one that I published April 22nd. Now this is a clip. I'm sorry, it's mostly of my back. I think one of my kids was taking the footage, but this is something we had at the coffee shop after this school meeting. Several people got up and spoke. I took just a small clip out of over 2 hours, and I'm making the point that I had let the school district know about this for months before we even had this meeting with the school district. Vail ISD Independent School District. Our customers are reaching out to us regarding your policy on the recent executive order regarding masks in schools. Their children are suffering a great deal of mental, emotional, and physical harm from this policy. We have a duty to speak out on their behalf. There's a very important reason not to, quote, let it ride on the current forced mask policy. In other words, to just let it go through the rest of the year. We've gotten scores of messages from parents and young people with a common theme. There is no hope. Nothing is going to change. My voice doesn't matter. This feeling is a major causal agent for mental and emotional health degradation and suicide. Compounding this deep angst is being physically masked, which has been a primal symbol of the loss of identity, suppression of one's voice, shame and ridicule, and forced control throughout history. Reasonable alternatives, including distancing, are available, rendering this inhumane practice senseless. It must not go on a single day longer. Many kids and parents think you don't care, but we believe you do. Yes, the easy way out would be to maintain the status quo, but haven't most of us parents taught our kids that the easy way out is usually the wrong decision? We respect people's right to choose what they deem best for their family and their family's health. You should too. Now, this is what I'm reading from is a letter that I had published in the Vail Voice, which interestingly, I tried to look it up and it's been removed. But I ask a really important question here. Does this seem like a hostile message? I don't think so. No. It's backed up by information and it's pleading. It's saying, please listen to these people. And I'm not just speaking off the top of my head because I've written things about this. Here's an article on August 26, 2020. I was editor-in-chief of this medical publication. And pandemic abuse, the main topic of the article was that with the lockdowns, children, women, sometimes men are locked in abusive situations. And they're not going to the doctor, the dentist, the people who would recognize that abuse. Also, when kids are masked, you can't see their expressions, and there are ways that they can be abused or not get help because of that. But one quote from that is, children are particularly at risk in the pressure cooker of family life, in isolation without the usual external oversight of teachers, general medical practitioners, and others, the researchers wrote. There has been an international recognition of the unintended negative consequences of the COVID-19 global pandemic management measures, including a spike in domestic violence along with psychological health risks, loneliness, school closure, economic vulnerability, and job loss. So I am, in fact, a professional, a subject matter expert on this, and I've been reaching out to the school district for weeks, if not months.
School officials telling me that the district is working on a letter to send to all parents here in Vail saying that nothing has changed. The mask mandate remains in place, so too do the school board members.
Despite all this information we passed on, despite over 200 parents coming forward, that was their conclusion. Nothing's going to change. We're going to ask why, and we're going to find out in a moment. But you see that some of those clips that I just played of that school board meeting were out in the sunshine. You see people were very calm, and then you see some angry parents. They only got angry after they were stalled, and then the meeting was canceled. They were angry that they didn't get to have a voice when they were desperate to help the children.
No child has died of COVID in this county, and somehow we're the bad guys.
What will you cling to now? Is it your pride, the money, or the control? Vail is still a small community, even though we're well known now thanks to all of you. I think you should ask yourselves if this is really the proverbial hill you want your names and reputations to die on. Speaking of reputations, I, along with 62,000 plus Vail residents, received this free magazine, Vail Style. For those of you that throw it out with your junk mail, it's an advertisement magazine. Nearly everything in it is a form of paid advertisement. even if it's made to look like journalism. This month, there was part 1 of an interview, if you can call it that, with John Carruth. The soft pitch interview that was done by one of the owners of the magazine, and it left me wondering, Mr. Carruth, was that a paid-for interview, or was that in trade so that you could improve your image among 62,000 plus people? Regardless, I find the people in this room, the letters to the editor, and the op-ed in the Bill Voice from this month much more telling of how many people think of you in this community. It's time to end mandatory masking and the mitigation policies. Rightly returning parents of choice to decide what's best for medically for their children.
Next time.
So this 13-year-old dead after missing from Vail area. We knew this had happened. We talked to some family members. And only recently, a couple of weeks ago, my wife got a call from someone in Tucson. And they said, I got more of the story. What had happened was this child was in an abusive situation. He had 2 homes, apparently divorced parents. And he was now locked in to that abusive situation right in our neighborhood. And he went out in the desert, and Tucson police went out to collect him. And I'm going to have trouble not breaking down here, but when he saw them coming, he said, I'm never going back there again. And he took the gun and shot himself in the head. And if you can imagine, Michael, this stuff was going on. And what was John Carruth's response? Not only to try to shut down the meeting, and then he went to virtual meetings after that, he got a bunch of people to go on and tell everybody how wonderful they are, how wonderful the district is. He went with Chris King on this tour to try to portray all these parents as violent. Instead of sitting down and saying, what can we do about this problem? He went after the parents, including me, and you're going to find some very interesting things out about that. And I'll tell you, I've done digging. I've had 4 years to research this, and I have the emails where they communicated this, and this went all the way to the federal level. And these parents who are concerned because their children were being driven to suicide and mental health disorders, deprived of an education, instead of being listened to, they were attacked, and it was because of money.
We've told the school district, we've told John Carruth, we've reported these stories, we've done Freedom Talk videos from a family whose child was put on suicide watch.
You know deep down inside, you are wrong, and they are wrong. You should fight.
Let me tell you something. No mother should ever have to put their child on suicide watch.
You know some of the profane responses I got? Oh, they're a bunch of redneck Trump supporters.
Come on, man.
We did not try to arrest a principal. We went to protect a child who had been forced to take a mask out of the garbage and put it on his face. It was quarantined with no test and no reason for the 3rd time. What we did is we called the police.
If they don't comply with the law, we're going to call the sheriff and ask for them to be arrested. We're just coming in to talk first.
And we wanted to report child abuse. And the police said, you're right, they are breaking the law, but we're not going to come out as too controversial. And this is on a principle. People who come to me, that they said she's locked kids in closets and forgot about them. Story after story. I had a sheriff's lieutenant come and say, I remember that. And he's gotten in touch with his school resource officer who's now in Texas. And I wrote about that as part of my job. The massive increase in domestic abuse, suicide, all of these things, it's because of how this has been mismanaged. A pandemic has never, ever been managed like this before. And that's the tragedy. And that's where the school boards need to pay attention and listen. Because they have driven some parents to the point of desperation. Because when your kids are put on suicide watch, and nobody will change, and you go because people have gone to school board meeting after school board meeting, including kids saying, you've got to have some balance in this. And they look at you with no expression on their faces. That's tyranny.
I'm wondering why I'm here again. I shouldn't be here again. Why do I have to re-speak myself? That just tells me that you weren't listening the first time. So I'm going to re-go once again because you don't decide to listen. Are you listening? That's a question.
I understand.
Thank you. I'm going to start off with students' mental health. Now, we feel depressed, sad, upset because we don't have social life or peer support. That's wrong. You are trying to control us with a tool. Instead of adding counseling
Why don't you just remove the tool or make it optional to use that tool? Because counseling's not going to do anything for me, nor any of the other students, because we already have counselors. And if those counselors haven't talked to us, then they should be fired. And that's wrong. They should hear the students out and try to get it to you. Peer support is very important, because if we don't have that, we're depressed and suicides happen. And that is wrong. Do you like deaths? Do you like dying? Or do you like having kids die? Because that is what you're doing, and that is wrong. And you already know that. And yet you still decide to do it. I don't know why you still decide to do it. That's your choice. Now, I say that policy is not over law. Law states that we and our parents have a choice to do what we want in our education. So why are we having a policy trump that law? That law is very important, and it is set in stone, in paper. So why is a policy that you made up in 1 year controlling everything? That is wrong. This is why we are trying to kick you out, so we have someone to actually listen to us, not you.
We've had some people gossiping locally, thinking that being a father of five, a guy who served a year as a volunteer teacher in Sri Lanka, would actually go and do something so foul. No, we didn't go to harass innocent school staff. We went to protect our children, and we have a duty to do that.
When fathers get involved, we pretty easily get profiled as if we're aggressive, potentially violent.
They start telling that you are a problematic person, and they try to intimidate you from every corner. And that's why you have to be strong, because they are attacking your children.
You saw that event I was speaking at. I did that at my own expense. Dinesh D'Souza came to our coffee shop. I paid him, paid for his expenses. We were able to raise the money after that first arrest. But this second one, I brought some guests in, paid for them, but we didn't have nearly the showing, and we lost money. And why? Because our customers were coming to us and saying, hey, we've got these vaccine mandates, and we don't know if we're going to have a job next week. And I'm sorry, we just can't afford it. So I started telling people, pay what you can afford, come for free, whatever. But by then it was too late. So in all of this, we took massive hits, not only financially, but you're going to see in a moment, they orchestrated a bogus arrest days after we went to get help that I literally sat in an office meeting, didn't even stand up. This was portrayed worldwide as if we were a bunch of domestic terrorists. And you're going to hear what a judge said. Unfortunately, it wasn't one of the trial judges. It was a judge who was weighing in on one of the fathers being charged with protective orders. So I'm going to play some more, unless, Michael, you want to say something at this point.
I will say something since you brought it up. There's so much to talk about here. I do want to see these clips, however, too. But I just remember, I think it was Peter Schiff that came out recently in the last week or two and says, you know what? The elite do not fear the people. They don't fear the people. And that has really paved the way for them to plot the pandemic like was clearly planned and orchestrated by the elite, because they don't fear the people. And so in order to tip the scale the other way, which would really, it should be balanced, where both sides respect each other, those who are in power and those of us who are of the peasant class, of the populace. That scale needs to be balanced for a healthy society, and we are way too far to where the elite do not fear the people. They don't respect the people. Matter of fact, they just want to get rid of us. And that was really, really evident throughout the pandemic.
You know, like the school principal, Diane Vargo at Mesquite, just absolute contempt for us that we would have the audacity to speak up for our kids. And by the way, before we ever went to the school, and you're going to hear a little bit about that story, there was a school mom whose son was quarantined, treated like a pariah because he came to school without a mask. And she went to get him, and he refused to leave because he wanted to make a stand in the office, a 7-year-old boy. And they pretended as if nothing of that happened. That, oh, we didn't know there were any concerns in the community. It's all a pack of lies. And just the utter disdain. And how desperate are you going to get when your child is put on suicide watch? I mean, how desperate were these parents, and how were they treated? Look, this is criminal. And I have worked so very hard. I've gone to events on my own time. Michael, you know, I've networked. I have an incredible network now, and I'm just a nobody. But this is going to be, now that the FBI is getting fixed, this is going to be on some desks. This is going to, people are going to be subpoenaed. People are going to probably go to jail over this, because when you know kids are dying and you take money for it, that is a form of murder. And I've never wavered on the fact that these policies were child abuse.
Since you bring that up, I got to say this here, because this is really where, you know, I got to give you my little personal tidbit in the pandemic is I was not affected like you were. I was not affected like many people were, because I was out playing golf. I never quarantined one day. And being in the media world, we were running around. We were getting jobs like crazy because everyone was live streaming. So I wasn't affected. But I'll tell you where this hits home. There was plenty of calls, incidents that happened where we found out, especially with kids like you're talking about, where anybody who knows anything about a surgical mask, okay, we did not need to be instructed what it does, okay? A surgical mask is worn by surgeons around patients who are susceptible. So it is for the people who might be sick or might have something that they might transmit it to someone who is vulnerable. That is, everyone knows that. And yet when we speak about it, we're demonized. And there too, these kids are wearing these masks day in and day out. They weren't changing them.
In 100+ degree heat, 110, 15, it's torture. And it, you know, there were a lot of things that went on, a lot of people targeted, a lot of lies. And one thing I'm trying to do, Michael, right now is, thank God the J6 prisoners have been pardoned. There's still some people in jail. There's still, you know, they don't know if they can work or own a firearm. And we kept a little boy, as you know, from Tucson, whose mother was sent to prison. He would have gone to the state otherwise. So we were very, very happy. We took care of that little boy. It could have been 4 years. Fortunately, thank God it turned into 2 months. We've seen the abortion protesters get some help and support. For some reason, the targeted parents aren't on the radar. I know Trump's only been in office for a little while. It's been acknowledged. You're going to see that this was a massive fraud against the people. And maybe it's just a matter of getting to things when you get to them. But one of my goals, Michael, is just to have the government say, look, there was a huge attack on people by the government, and we need to go in and make this right. And what I'd really like, call me idealistic, because we've lost everything, and I'm 55. We're starting over in life, and we've had some tough times simply because we stood up to this. What I would like the government to say is, we are going to restore people who were targeted, people who had the courage to stand up when it cost the most, and we're going to restore them to where they were before all this happened. I think the government owes that to us. You'd think you could just maybe go up to Capitol Hill and ask for that, but it's not that easy. I can't thank you enough for doing this, because this truth needs to get out.
Absolutely. And you are not a nobody. You are somebody. You are a warrior. You are on the front lines fighting for our freedom, because without people like you, all evil needs is an open door. When people are not reacting, there's no election fraud because no one's saying anything about it. No, people are saying things about it, and you're silencing them, not allowing people to speak. And that's the same thing with the vaccines. That's the same thing with fraud. That was the same thing with Ukraine. Is all this corruption was happening, and people were speaking out. And even Mark Zuckerberg comes out and says the White House approached him.
Yeah.
So no, there is justice that has to be had here, so this doesn't happen again. These monsters will be roaming the countryside as long as we allow them to. But once you unveil them, and thank the Lord for Trump and DOJ and all the corruption that's being found, but we got a lot of work to do right now while it is daylight.
And one of the most painful things was what you might call friendly fire, people who supposedly are on our side calling you a grifter, saying you're doing this to get attention. Certainly the school district did that, and you kind of expect that because you're opposing them and revealing them. But and I forgive the people who did that. But and I've seen that, Michael. I've seen like people at all levels, people who have huge names. They're doing it to make money. They're profiting off people's pain. I was never one of those. And if I'm a grifter, I'm the worst one ever, because we had our first home together in Tucson. We loved it. We wanted to stay there forever. When they went after our children, that's when we said, we've got to leave. You go after my children, that's off limits.
Right here, you're seeing this happened between the arrests, an April 27th school board meeting that originated in our coffee shop with a meeting the day before. I was the first one in to that meeting, and literally I'm saying, excuse me, as I'm going by this man. You can see he's not even looking at me. He's not trying to stop me. They had designated a side room with video monitors for us dirty anti-maskers, but over 200 parents showed up to that school board meeting to just simply to communicate to the school board meeting, hey, your policies, your COVID policies, they're leading to youth suicides. We had a 17-year-old boy who gave me his speech and wanted to tell them why his friend jumped off the bleachers at the very high school where the school board was meeting, and they wouldn't let these people in. We finally just stood our ground and said, you are going to let these people in. They have a right to speak.
Tim Steller, the Arizona Daily Communist Star, Tim Steller defamed me so much. He wasn't there. He wrote pieces on me, Tucson Weekly. They were terrible. I had this guy who was literally threatening to kill our family. He recruited 2 women who didn't even know me, somehow convinced them that I was cyber stalking them. They pulled out restraining orders on me. I had to go to court over that. The judge threw it out. It was absolutely ridiculous. The Tucson Weekly had written about this, a very disparaging piece. What do when I'm not guilty? They come back and say, yeah, Judge Riojas said he's not guilty, but we all know he is. How is that fair press?
And that is pure defamation, and that's illegal activity by the press, and they should be reprimanded and fined for it. And this is exactly why I say they are the mainstream corporate corrupt, because the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson Weekly are owned by corporations who are feeding them information and telling them what to write. They are the corporate corrupt land of make-believe satanic deception. Go ahead.
They need to retract those pieces immediately from online because they're absolutely false, demonstrably false. And I'm not going to let them get away with it. And people say, well, why didn't you sue? Well, we had a suit for defamation, and then we went to a law firm there in Tucson on whatever floor of a big building. We thought, okay, they're going to do this. And then, oh, gosh, well, one of our clients is one of the TV stations, so we can't do it. Yeah. We turned down, after that first arrest, we turned down a $2 million settlement. And this is why. I told my wife about it. I said, it comes with a gag order. She said, that's not why we're doing this. And so we had a small window where some people were donating and we were able to pay them for what they'd done so far, but we fired the lawyer. And so there's a couple things. One is, especially when you're under duress, your business is being attacked, you've been canceled culture out of your job. Where do you get the money to do that? Second thing is, it can be hard to find a good lawyer. The one we had was basically trying to make a quick buck and settle this quickly. We didn't do this to get money. We did this because people were dying and our country needed people to stand up. But the second reason, which is very important to me, is I didn't want to focus my time, energy, and what little money I had on saving my own butt. I wanted to fight for my country. And I have seen people, Michael, it's like winning the lottery. They get a good lawyer, they get the funding. Maybe Charlie Kirk puts them on front. He never did that for us, even though he knew about the situation. They get big settlements, and then they go and they have the life and they leave the fight. I'm not going to criticize their choices. We didn't want anybody to go under that stress. It shouldn't be that like whoever can afford it, whoever drums up the most support, it gets some justice. We need justice for a lot of people.
Yeah.
After you trying to set you as an example, but they're doing this to many Americans across the country.
Yeah, they are. They are. And Vail, Arizona Superintendent John Carruth, I found out before that first school meeting ever happened, he contacted the sheriff's lieutenant in that area and wanted them to profile and target me. His response was, this isn't the Soviet Union. So they were tracking me, targeting me. The FBI was investigating me. Here's how we're fighting back. This past summer, I wrote a letter to a number of congressmen. A very prominent congressman, who I'm not going to name yet, got back to me immediately. One of his staffers got back, said, this congressman has appointed 3 of us to investigate this. So they have been investigated since.
I can say now that was Jim Jordan, and I was amazed at the
July
response.
7th, which they're going to find out really soon. There are several of us, including parenting group advocates, attorneys. I'm talking one of these attorneys is very high level. We're going to meet with them in Washington.
Drew is 7 years old and in first grade at Mesquite, and he'd like to talk about how he feels about social distancing, hand sanitizer, masks, and vaccines.
Thank you, Drew.
So, I don't like vaccines. I think they're unhealthy.
What happened the day that we went to school without a mask on? What did they do that day?
They made us do the waiting game.
What else happened?
Then we leaved.
They wouldn't let you in the classroom, right? They took all the other kids out. They made them go to the art room and segregated you?
Yeah.
Yeah, what else happened? How do you feel when you wear a mask? Do you get headaches?
Yes, I get headaches.
What else?
It makes me thirsty a lot.
What happens when second grade starts? What do you want to see happen?
No masks there.
And what else? You don't want to be thought of as differently from your friends, right? You don't want to be treated differently than the rest of the people in your class, like you have been, right?
Yeah.
What else? Anything else you want to say? Okay, we would like to attend second grade, but what you vote on tonight depends on whether or not we do that. Thank you.
Kelly, so you're fighting on this in a different way. You're also worried about the family, the schools, our children, all of it. Tell us about what this fight and this coalition you put together.
Absolutely, Steve. As you know, there's been a war on parents, and we've seen a lot of that in the school boards. What we haven't seen a lot of is what's happened from Washington, D.C. on down and what the National School Board Association did. So I've put together a coalition of parenting group leaders, parents, constitutional attorneys, public figures. This National School Board Association memo, which was written on September 29th, 2021, precipitated the October 4th Merrick Garland memo designating parents as domestic terrorists. I found FOIA'd emails that showed that within the NSBA, they said this was inappropriate, that communication issues plague the NSBA. 14 attorneys general sent a letter after the Merrick Garland memo calling this NSBA memo a massive fraud against the American people. And while they backtracked on it, there are people who've gone to prison, they've been fined, they've been harassed. In my research, I've discovered where this all started. We need to go back to the fraudulent premise, which caused so much suffering and persecution of parents and families.
Kelly, thank you for joining us. We're going to cover this one closely. So thank you for being on here today to kick it off.
Steve, thanks for being a fighter and allowing me to come on today, because I'm a fighter too, and we got to take back our country.
Thanks, brother.
I'm so thankful to Steve Bannon, to Eric Metaxas, to others who've helped carry this story. I'm going to be calling people in person because I want this, what we're doing right now, to go all over the country, because this truth has to be told. And, you know, when I started, I didn't know how to use the camera, the mic, all that. I had to learn it, buy it at my own expense. And it's been a harrowing journey, Michael. And I know you were there. I believe you attended my trial, where I was sentenced to 100 days in jail and over $10,000 in fines, which they illegally took from our house against the law. Multiple death threats from around the country. You're going to see some of that because I have some video, and you're going to see some of the threats that came in our mail. And for those who took the position of guilty until proven innocent, that's not how this country works. For those who judged me harshly, maybe the other fathers harshly, maybe now that you've seen what they did to Donald Trump, lawfare, I've been writing about lawfare for years, and not just Republicans. Tulsi Gabbard, RFK, Tulsi Gabbard was put on an FBI watch list, no-fly list, or whatever they call it. This was the government attacking the people, and they used and misused and abused the law to do that. We didn't do anything wrong. You're going to hear a judge say that.
Okay, before you play that, though, I want to say something about your trial, and I want to speak to those who say that you are guilty. Okay, there's a truth in humanity. Okay, and everyone knows this in law enforcement, that when you're looking for someone who is guilty, you usually look for the person who has the criminal record, who has a past history, because really people don't change their behavior. What they did before is what they're going to do again. Okay. So Kelly, I'd like to ask you today, with what they were convicting you of, and they say you were such a bully and that you were so angry and that you were so violent. How many times has it happened since that day? Has this behavior continued? How many more convictions? What kind of criminal record do you have since that day?
None. And,
None.
you know, I had been arrested September 15th of 2020. That's the first arrest. It was dismissed. Everybody knew it was bogus. It was televised. You know, you remember that. So I had a clean record. I had no priors. And again, in September, I was arrested again, this time for sitting in an office meeting. And you look at the timeline when all of this happened with Merrick Garland, it was that same month of September. And I am mentioned in those emails, not by name, but, you know, by certain things, by events. So they, and I had a feeling at the time I was too stressed to really follow the media. I was being contacted by CNN and MSNBC, UK Daily News, all of them. I chose to ignore them because I knew I wasn't going to get a fair trial in the media. But no, I had no priors. I don't have a criminal record. In fact, I've served overseas. I've gone down to Nicaragua twice to help people like, I'm not perfect, but I'm kind of a model citizen.
Well, the point is there. Okay, there is nothing around him that verifies that he is what they are claiming he is.
Yeah, I have
versus Joe Biden and that demonic satanic regime and all the little minions that go down and all the election fraud and all the persecution of Trump and so many others. There's your guilty party by the evidence of they never really changed their behavior. And ladies and gentlemen, why this interview is important, why what he's talking about is important. They're coming again. They're playing possum. They're going to do it again, but at a grander scale, and watch the lies get bigger to cover up the old ones. Yeah. Watch. That's why you got to get the truth out there. That's why this is so important. Sorry, Kelly, go ahead with the that's very important.
Yes, absolutely. If you're not fired up watching this, I'll tell you, I showed that video of the first arrest to people who were Chinese dissidents who fled here. Families were tortured, live organ harvesting and everything. And some of them watched that video and they said, I can't believe this happened in the US. This is stuff we saw in China. Now, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who you might know, author of Gulag Archipelago and other works, for which he won the Nobel Prize, he said something very insightful. He spent 8 years in a gulag. He was persecuted by his government. And if you think we ought to just let this go, I think it was The Atlantic put out, we need to, amnesty is what the word they used. Alexander Solzhenitsyn said this: it is unthinkable to fail to distinguish between what constitutes an abominable atrocity that must be prosecuted and what constitutes the past, which ought not to be stirred up. In keeping silent about evil, in burying it so deep within us that no sign of it appears on the surface, we are implanting it, and it will rise up 1,000-fold in the future. When we neither punish nor reproach evildoers, we are not simply protecting their trivial old age. We are thereby ripping the foundations of justice from beneath new generations. Young people are acquiring the conviction that foul deeds are never punished on earth. It is going to be uncomfortable, horrible to live in such a country. It is so important that we get justice, that people are arrested and they are forced to pay restitution to the people, their own citizens, that they took money to watch their children die, that they targeted people like me.
I can't, though, get out of my head that Moloch speech from Biden when he says that MAGA and Trump are the biggest threat in the world today. I just can't get over that, because that too, then that trickles down right to Merrick Garland, and that trickles down to, parents are terrorists for questioning our narrative, for standing up for their kids. How dare they? I can't get over how evil that speech was.
Yeah, it was evil. And this is so devastating on so many levels. My wife and I absolutely have trauma, PTSD. I've talked to people in the military. In fact, a man who served in the FBI had seen 2 tours of duty overseas, active combat. He saw kids being blown apart. He became an FBI whistleblower, and the government went after him and his family. And you know what he said? He said, for all I saw overseas, what I experienced being a whistleblower was worse. And I'll tell you something. I have 2 older sons. I've been remarried for 14 years. Andrew and I have 3 kids together. So they're her stepsons, but I've been a wonderful father to them. All this bogus media, defamation, all of it, it was used, I'm not going to say by whom, but it was used to alienate them from me. And they haven't talked to me in at least 2 years. And believe me, I've been a great father. I wrote a book for my sons. It's really, really tough. What it is unrestricted warfare. I just had the book here, but by these 2 Chinese colonels, they talked about targeting citizens, that everyone's a soldier. So this is a kind of war that knows no boundaries. The battlefield is everywhere, they say. So those of us who've stood up, who've taken these hits, we are in every way a soldier. And I didn't serve overseas. I'm not going to compare that, but this certainly is a terrible form of warfare.
Absolutely. It's an information war is really what it is. And you have got to, as a citizen of the United States, a constitutional republic as it stands right now, you have got to get involved. You are required to get involved, or you'll just lose it. And like he says, then the Chinese and the communist model of what Soviet Union, China, Cuba, Laos, whatever you want to make the example, it's awful. It's horrible, because there's evil out there who would like to take control and make the decisions for you. Go ahead, Kelly. You had more video?
The story that the school district put out was that 3 radicalized violent men stormed a school uninvited, attempted to arrest and zip tie principal, fled when the police came. 3 days later, 5 police officers showed up at my house to give me a paper ticket for misdemeanor 3 trespassing. And by the time this went to court, they had tacked on a bunch of other misdemeanors. Everyone I've showed the video to has watched it and said, you guys didn't do anything wrong. There was a history with the school district. We had a large number of parents coming to the meetings saying, look, because you're force masking kids, because you're quarantining and isolating kids, kids are committing suicide. Parents came forward with grave concerns about the mental health of their children due to these COVID policies and the lockdowns and the forced masking and all the rest.
It's time to do what a growing list of countries have done and announce we're going back to something more like normal, beginning with recognizing that what we're doing to kids is unnecessary and horrible, and I don't even like kids. But making kids who have a COVID survivability rate of 99.98% mask up like bandits? Unfortunately, the thing that's getting stolen is their education, their sanity, and their social skills. A study this week from a professor at Johns Hopkins concluded that the lockdowns we all suffered through had little impact in reducing COVID deaths. Okay, that's kind of a big one to get wrong. I'm just asking, how much wrong do you get to be while still holding the default setting for people who represent the science?
Now, this is Bill Maher, who's not a Trump fan. He's a liberal, I think more of a classical liberal now, but
he's got common sense there.
He does, yep.
We now need suicide hotlines printed on the back of our ID cards.
The entire community had this crisis. We had people coming to our coffee shop saying, look, kids were committing suicide, and we have the stats. And instead of sitting down with the community and the parents and saying, hey, how can we resolve this? They portrayed the parents as radical, and DOJ and the FBI ended up sending that memo around that supposedly parents are domestic terrorists for disagreeing. What we were trying to do here was stand our ground and peacefully protest, but also show them that this can't continue. By the way, we have video of this entire incident from the time we went into the building to the time we left. Nobody stormed the school. We're invited to an office meeting. We sat. You'll be able to see people in the background calmly walking around. They didn't lock down the school. And I'm going to play more of this because you're going to see a little bit more information about that. There wasn't any disruption to classrooms or learning at Mesquite yesterday. So we were in the office having a parent administration meeting. Here's a headline they posted about me. An anti-masker just tried to zip tie a school principal. His kids don't even go to her school. This was a hearing on an order of protection against one of the fathers. So there were 3 of us fathers. They put out this story that we attempted to zip tie and arrest a principal. Listen to what the judge says, because we had the whole thing on video. He watched the video, and this was his analysis.
I listened to the tape, and a couple things I noticed. One, defendant never raised his voice. I listened to the whole tape. He never stood up, which I found very significant because you're right. His size would be intimidating if he stood up and got in your face, but he didn't. He sat down the whole time. That was one thing I was looking for, is what steps he did. I mean, what he did is he disagreed with you. That's not disorderly conduct. That's not rude. That's not threatening. You guys don't get to define how people disagree with you. School districts don't have that right. The citizens have that right. I'm dismissing your order.
So what was the story with the zip ties? You brought zip ties?
Vice News sucks, by the way. We just got a call from Dad. He was distraught. He said they've abused my child. They're refusing to let him go. We didn't know what we were facing. We didn't know would there be unruly people there. Going in, one of the guys took him and said, no, we're not going to need these. You know, we kind of figured out what was going on. So he just held them. We all sat and talked. They never came up. They never said, what are those? You know, what they did is they went afterwards and looked at the video and tried to make a big deal of it. But, you know, my lawyer in court asked, did Mr. Walker get up? Did he take a step toward you? Did he do this? Did he do that? They said, no. And then the city prosecutor gets up and he says, well, did you feel like this could have happened? Do you feel like that could have happened?
Oh, my God.
I didn't even have the things in my possession. And the dad who actually had them in his possession got let off with a plea deal and a $250 fine. They sentenced me to 100 days in jail and a $10,000 fine. And then they proceeded to steal.
Well, wait, I thought that he was just saying how you didn't do any of these things.
He did, but I had a different judge who, by the way, you go and you look at Tucson.com and there's an article where the magistrate commission unanimously recommended against reappointing her. They said she doesn't offer due process. She's abusive to defendants. Out of the 3 dads, all I did was sit there. In fact, I called a sheriff's lieutenant to try to get advice. I called a state senator to get advice. And the whole thing was just ridiculous. All over the world, media has my picture out there saying that I attempted to zip tie a principal. Nothing of the sort happened. I'm literally just sitting there talking. But
Wait, so why did the judge throw the book at you? On what basis?
No basis. You're a large, scary man is what it came down to. And at first it was misdemeanor 3 trespassing. They show up on my house on a Sunday night, 3 days after it happens, deliver this piece of paper to me, and then they start stacking other things up on disorderly conduct, disrupting an educational institution. And by the way, in court, we had an email from the superintendent of schools, John Carruth, who's a punk. The day after, he emailed all of the staff and he said the situation was resolved peacefully and the educational setting was not disturbed. We had that. The judge waived to decide, and I still got charged with disrupting an educational
institution. She waived to decide? What do you mean?
She wouldn't admit it as evidence.
What?
Yeah, it was that bad. And so we sold our home in Tucson. We found out as we were closing that they had put a judgment lien on our house for almost $10,000. And we had to get a lawyer, and they said, look, we have this Homestead Act in Arizona that says unless they make $250,000 or more on their home sale, you don't get to put a lien on the house for any reason, including a judgment. And they said, well, we don't consider that his homestead. What, the house where we lived, the house we bought, the house where we had our family and backyard chickens. So they've still got that $10,000. We're $3,000 into a lawyer trying to get it back. I mean, literally, this is how corrupt these people are.
I'm in charge, and you're going to sign your ticket, or you're going to go to jail.
Because they went out to the media the very next day, spun this false story, this is what we got. Letters mailed to my home. We're going to zip tie your wife, rape her in front of you, kill your kids in front of you. My picture was posted all over town by some idiot. So the FBI was investigating us for misdemeanor 3 trespassing. Do you think they investigated this? Hell no, they didn't care. Kelly Townsend was at the time the state senator who I called. And what I did was I went there to support the father. He had asked me, you know, I want to stay calm. I need witnesses for this. So I called a sheriff's lieutenant. I called Kelly Townsend. The advice I got from Kelly Townsend was get it in writing. Just wait. Don't leave until you get in writing a rationale why they did this, and then leave. And that's exactly what I told the father. They said, you need to leave, but first get the documentation. So they made it seem like we refused to leave. No, he didn't want to leave until he got on paper why they were doing this.
Judge, every single second of this encounter, everything relevant to the crimes charged, captured on video. You've seen the video. Both sides have stipulated to the video's admission. And the fact that the state needed 9 witnesses, nearly 2 full days of testimony to try to prove to you what you could have easily seen on the video on your own volition should be evidence enough that they've overcharged this case. And Mr. Walker is not guilty of trespass, disorderly conduct, and interference with an educational institution. You learned during the trial that Mesquite Elementary decided to send home. You learned that called Mr. Walker and told him that not only was his son being sent home yet again for the 3rd time in weeks, but also that school personnel had assaulted his son by forcing him to wear a mask. It was with this knowledge and this understanding that Mr. Walker went to the school. And in order to convict Mr. Walker of interference with an educational institution, you must find that his purpose, that his intent upon going into the school was to disrupt the educational function of the school. And the state has provided no evidence to prove Mr. Walker, that was Mr. Walker's intent. Nothing. Frankly, there's lots of evidence to the contrary. There's ample evidence provided to demonstrate that was not Mr. Walker's intent. The time Mr. Walker set foot on the school grounds, he earnestly believed that the school administration was breaking the law. He earnestly believed that the school personnel had assaulted. But it bears repeating that Mr. Walker never used the zip ties, never attempted to use zip ties, never attempted to make a citizen's arrest, and frankly spoke conditionally when he was talking about, said, if you continue, or everything was conditional, and there was no steps, no action, nothing taken. And it's, the video from the school makes it clear that Mr. Walker, along with the other 2 men, were frustrated that being sent home for a 3rd time. They wanted the quarantine order and letter from the school. You've admitted part of it, or a part of it I should say has been admitted, this close contact. The other document that you heard about, and it's basically in testimony because I read the relevant parts into evidence, especially the part about, you know, people's legal recourse. So that's in evidence whether the actual document was admitted or not. But They wanted the quarantine order and a letter from the school. They knew that there was a way to challenge the order, to challenge the quarantine, but they didn't know the process, and that letter explained the process. Mr. Carney testified that it was the school district procedure to provide that letter to a student's parents upon the decision to send the student home and impose the quarantine. At the time Ms. Vargo asked the three to leave, she had not provided the letter to or anyone else. At the time Ms. Vargo asked the three to leave, she had not complied with Vail School District policy regarding the quarantine order and letter. One paragraph in this letter, or the letters, because it's frankly part and parcel, is vitally important. And that there's a paragraph at the end that discusses what a parent can do if they disagree with the quarantine order, and if they can challenge the matter in Superior Court. During the encounter here, Mr. Walker was trying to help his friend get answers. He testified to that. You heard it on the video well before the video of the incident, well before this obviously came to court, that Mr. Walker was trying to help his friend get answers as to why his son was being quarantined so that a decision can be made as to the potential action challenging the matter in Superior Court. Diane Vargo wasn't giving them the answers, and she wasn't willing to produce the letter. Instead, she attempted to shut down the meeting and left the room. Part of a school administrator's job is to deal with parents. You've heard this ad nauseum here. Deal with parents who are upset regarding something that occurred at the school related to their son or daughter. And sometimes that might involve grades, sometimes that might involve school-imposed discipline. And during COVID-19, it understandably involved why a child was being sent home time and time again. Diane Vargo chose not to address the concerns raised by the parents and simply excused herself from the meeting. Did she ask Mr. Walker to leave? Well, frankly, she asked Mr. to leave. But the state's theory is that, she asked them, they're all acting together. But it's clear in the video that she asked to leave. That's not all the law requires to be guilty of trespass. What the law requires is that the person remain unlawfully after a reasonable request to leave. So remaining unlawfully, and then after a reasonable request to leave. Mr. Walker remained at the school only so long as it took to address the questions and concern that was being raised. We've seen on the video that once Mr. Carney, the assistant superintendent, arrived at the school, he asked the pertinent question, "What do you need?" The response was simple. They wanted a copy of the quarantine order and letter. Once they got it, Kelly Walker left immediately. So it wasn't reasonable at all for the principal, who again is not a home, this isn't her home. She's not the master of that domain. She's a paid public administrator at a school where the taxpayers are the clients, and the clients were in her office asking for information, relevant information about the kid who was being quarantined for the second or third time. Okay, that is not a reasonable request to leave when you are not the authority. Oh, sorry, this meeting's over. No, that's unreasonable. Once the voice of reason came in, Mr. Carney, and said, "What do you need?" They said, "We need this information." They got it. They left within 45 seconds. That is reasonable. And that, if they stayed beyond that, yes, the state would have a case. The fact is, Judge, it was unreasonable for them. The request was unreasonable, and therefore, then they didn't unlawfully remain. Disorderly conduct requires violent or seriously disruptive behavior. Mr. Walker's actions were nothing of the sort. He was calm, he was composed. While he may have been forceful and direct as far as some of his comments, he did not commit disorderly conduct. He's in a school setting, his voice was measured, he was certainly stating his point. That's exactly the purpose. And these people are paid to deal with that. Again, this is not a personal matter. This is a public matter, paid by public officials who are trained to deal with this and whose duty it is to deal with this. As Superintendent Carruth told his staff and the parents of the school, there was no disruption. The situation ended peacefully, with no disruption to the classroom environment or the educational institution. And you can't ignore that, Judge. No matter how much Mr. Carruth tried to avoid admitting that he wrote that, and having admitted that he only, writes what he considers to be the truth. He tried to back out of that. He tried to avoid that. He tried to say, oh, that's taken out of context, or that's not all that I wrote, or this and that. No, he wrote that. It's clear to me he wrote that. And I think that answers your questions right there. And that goes directly to the elements of all the ones pertaining to the school and the interference with the school, disruption of the school, as well as disorderly conduct, and ended peacefully. There was no violence. There was nothing. This is a discussion. Sometimes heated. Certainly the parents and the clients of the school are frustrated, but that is the duty of the administrators, and it's they've been trained to handle it, and it's within their job description to handle it. We've heard that time and time again. So because Mr. Walker left immediately after being provided the letter, he's not guilty of the trespass, criminal trespass. Because Mr. Walker's actions did not amount to seriously disruptive behavior, he's not guilty of disorderly conduct. And because Mr. Walker's intent was not to disrupt or interfere with the legal use of the premises, and also because his actions did not amount to any disruption to the classroom environment or the educational institution, he's not guilty of disorderly conduct. And furthermore, Judge, you heard it in the back and forth exchange between me and Kruth. This is where they're saying, oh, well, the classroom wasn't disrupted, the classrooms weren't disrupted, the students weren't disrupted. Try to say they were disrupted by what happened the next day after they went out to the media and posted all and spoke to the media, both locally and regionally and nationally. And then they complain that there's an uproar with the parents. They brought that upon themselves by speaking to the media about something that, frankly, they knew was going to be in litigation. And then they claim, oh, interference? No, nothing. There was no school interference that day whatsoever. And the office, as Kruth testified, the office is exactly the place that say, oh, well, you disrupted me from doing what I would normally be doing, or the principal couldn't use her office. That's exactly what the front office is for, to deal with unhappy parents, disgruntled parents, or to field these questions. And to claim that by doing their duty, that they couldn't be doing what they were supposed to be doing is not disingenuous, it's a contradiction. You say in the video, you can watch it again, but because of what I just said, Mr. Walker is not guilty of trespass, of disorderly conduct, or any of the crimes, including disruption of the school environment or the school, interference with the school, and we ask that you find him not guilty on all of the counts.
And by the way, I've kept in touch with Kelly Townsend, and she said recently to me, when you talk to Kash Patel, I want to be in on that conversation. I said, yeah, absolutely, let's do it. Because she knows the truth. This sheriff's lieutenant knows the truth. And if you want to see the whole video, go to realfreedomtalk.com or go to Rumble and find my channel there. I might have to put it more prominent. It's kind of buried, but you can watch the whole video and you can see, did I do anything? Did I try to arrest anybody? Was I even holding the zip ties? Well, you're going to be disappointed if you're looking for those things. If I had done these things, I would be charged with felonies, including attempted kidnapping. I was charged with freaking parking tickets, basically. And they made it, the worldwide media made it look like
a hostage situation,
yeah,
sort of
no,
thing.
It wasn't. They never put the school on lockdown. None of that happened. It was a conversation that they didn't like because we were exposing them. And shame on the Tucson police. When a father calls and says, I'm reporting child abuse and you don't come out, why the hell do you have a police force? And why did they come after us 3 days later? They're acting as security guards for the establishment. They swear an oath to protect the people and uphold the Constitution. And there's a lot of good cops. I know a lot of them in Tucson. Most of the law enforcement people were very supportive, but there are sellouts. And look, the guy on camera, poor guy, he didn't know what was going on. I said, what's your probable cause? I don't know. I was just sent here. But either sign this or I'm going to take you to jail. What country are we living in here? You don't even know why you're arresting me? You're just following orders, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Going back to the nurses who are given the jab. Oh, I'm just following orders. You know, I'm just doing my job. Oh, I mean, if they get away with it, it's setting up for the next one. And the next one's going to be more severe. They're going to bring in a new wave of restrictions, and anyone who stands up against it, whoever says something against our official narrative, oh, you got to be dealt with. Oh, you're the bad guy. You're the terrorist.
And did you see how patronizing that school official was about the parents? Well, there's some people who always like to shout loud. You know, Darcy Mentone, shame on her, communications director or whatever for the school district. I have the sheriff's report where she said, oh, Kelly Walker's just doing this to get attention. He's doing this to sell coffee. Shame on her. That's so far from the truth. What an absolute slander. And she needs to lose her job. John Carruth needs to lose his job.
It's the same thing in churches too, where people are making, oh, you're just trying to get more people in your congregation. Oh, it's the same. It's the same excuse. Oh, it's okay if I do evil.
Yep.
That's okay. But when this guy speaks out against it, oh, he's just trying to get attention, ladies and gentlemen. He's trying to get attention over here. That's not the case.
And I'll tell you something, Michael, that probably a lot of people don't know. When that school meeting happened, it had begun in Viva Coffee House the night before. Parents got together. We said, we got to do something. We're going to go to this meeting and peacefully air our grievances. I went there with a suit on, and some guys, ex-military guys, security guys, they were with me because of the death threats. They came with me. I went immediately over to the TV cameras. Why? Not because I wanted attention, because I knew that's the most dangerous place to be, because you are going to be a target to every insane, lefty, unstable person. And when they were talking to me, they said, we understand you're in charge. And I said, no, I'm not. And they said, well, who is? I pointed back to the people. I said, they are. I didn't go in front of the camera because I need to be on the news. Look, I own an ad agency. I've been on the news plenty of times. I did it to protect people. And we went in. We were the first in. We stood our ground. We refused to let them say no. You won't see me in those videos where they swore in the new board members. Why? Because as soon as they let the people in, I told the guys, we're going back out in the parking lot. This is their moment, not ours. I have never been motivated by such an obscene thing that Darcy Mentone said. How dare she? You know, if I've gotten on camera, it's been a high price to pay. And I try to tell people, you do not want to be in front of the camera. Because when you have letters coming to your house that I'm going to come in the dead of night and murder your family, you don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
That's terrifying. My wife didn't want the kids to play in the front yard. So what? I'm doing this to get attention, putting my own family in the line of fire. That lady needs to lose her job. Unreal.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable that we live in a country like this. And you know, I blame the prostitutes there again. Those prostitutes, the mainstream corporate corrupt land of make believe, satanic Decepticon, hellbound mainstream media. The job of the mainstream media, I cannot express this, is to take you to hell with them when you die. So they are going to push the lies to hoping that, and I know I have a lot of Christians who listen to this. Okay, this is a Christian station. I got it. You got to understand when even the local mainstream media, I know because I've had contacts in it all for 20 years now. They are given propaganda. They are to push it. And these prostitutes, that's what I call them. They're prostitutes, but they're on the media. They're prostitutes. They are paid to give you lies and disinformation. And now that we have the revelations from DOJ that Politico and the rest of them were given just a truckload of money to push the propaganda, I don't think Kelly has to sell his story very far.
It's like my wife said when all this DOJ stuff came out, USAID, she said, they funded this for us to be attacked, our own government.
There you go.
This makes Watergate look like nothing.
They would have never been able, Kelly, they would have never been able to do what they did to you without federal money being pushed their way. They would have never been able to. In the local media and the national media, they would have had to fund themselves, and that's impossible. We push lies.
Yeah, Arizona, just in that 1 year, the schools got $5.5 billion to keep those face diapers on the kids. And that's why they wanted to hide what was happening, because if they had stopped that, their cash cow would be in peril.
Yeah, and look at what RFK Jr. did just yesterday, announcing that they are ending all advertising for the vaccine, for flu shots, and so many others. All that propaganda is ending. And watch now. I believe there's going to be a revolution in health where we are actually going to, I think society is going to be more engaged in their health than ever, certainly the last 10 years.
I want to add this, Michael. I have direct access to RFK Jr. I actually applied for Children's Health Defense about 3 years ago. They said you're overqualified. I have those people behind me. I have Kash Patel's phone number. I have people who are going to hand this to Pam Bondi. There is going to be a reckoning, and it's not vengeance. As a Christian, I have to forgive people. But God is a God of mercy, but also justice, and justice is coming. And I want to say this. I'm going to look right in the camera. If you know about this, if you work for the school district, if you have information, this would be a damn good, sorry, here I'm cussing on a Christian station, you can cut that, but this would be a really good time to come forward. You can email me at Real Freedom Talk gmail.com. I have people from within the NASB who are going to talk to me, who are willing to be whistleblowers, because they didn't like what happened. They didn't agree with it. And some of them were vocal, but this is going to come out in the wash. There's no escaping this. Yeah. The tables have turned.
Big time.
This is a video I did in 2022.
This started a chain of persecution by Pima County, by the city, by others, and even by the FBI. Yes, I have been watched and monitored by the FBI. They've been in my business before. So their intent now is to intimidate me, to shut me up, so that I won't share how these policies enforced by the school districts, which, by the way, they were paid for to uphold, led to youth suicides. Not one child in our county died of COVID. About 6, I believe, kids committed suicide. I'm looking up that number right now. So we had this decision, and some people said, man, you should move away. You're up against great odds. They have more power and resources. Parents came forward with grave concerns about the mental health of their children due to these COVID policies and the lockdowns and the forced masking and all the rest. We're going to reveal that. And there are going to be some nationwide articles, documentaries, and people are going to be held accountable. It's so important. I know everybody's tired, but we've got to keep fighting, because if we let these people get away with what they did, they'll do it again.
And this was 3 years ago. I had no way to do this except to write, to go out, to go to events and meet people. But I said what I was going to do, and I'm following through, and it's going to happen. I didn't have any power, prestige. I went to an America Fest for the first time. I felt like a nobody. You know, you've got all these stars going, oh, there's Dennis Prager. The crowd's following. I just started sticking out my hand and meeting people. And when I've sent pictures of me next to some notable person, it isn't because I want to be seen. It's because I want people to know that I'm fulfilling that promise that I made right there. Mm-hmm. There's a big difference. And I get really tired of seeing people with their glamour shots and celebrating and saying, oh, we're in the golden age. No, we're not. Not until we right what was wrong. We have to have justice, because I'm 55. I'm starting all over again. I have kids to support.
Yeah. And I cannot stress enough, this is going to be this battle, as good as what your connections are to Kash Patel, Trump, and RFK Jr. This is going to be, each and every one of us need to do our part. And it's not, it is denying the vaccine. It calls for getting involved at your local school boards, getting involved at your local town halls, getting involved, especially in local politics. It's awesome to do look and see what's going on the national end too, but we really need a grant. Everyone's got to get involved. When they see the people that are waking up, it is really hard. And you're using your rights. If you use your rights, it is very hard for them to take it away.
Yeah. Thank God Trump got back in office, but it was never certain. Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lohmeyer, who's now going to be second in the Air Force, he came to Viva. He's from Tucson. We've had a very good friendship since. He said to me several times, Kelly, I think this is it. Like, I think the country's going to fall. Thank God it hasn't. But I used to tell people, and it's still true, there was a thin line of patriots holding this country together. Trump wasn't in office. We didn't have the power. It was you and me. It was grassroots people. It was people like me and Matthew Lohmeyer and others who are willing to take the hits. These are the people who've held the country together. And, thank God Trump's in office. But honestly, Donald Trump, the administration, they need to go back and say, we owe these people a debt of gratitude. And I think Trump knows it. Anyway, let me continue here.
Paul, with a parent out in Arizona who's being targeted right now, he was telling me that basically, he's being targeted by the FBI over, of course, this whole school boards thing. And he was saying that, they've had some serious stuff. The stuff parents are dealing with is insane. Parents are dealing with not only the transgender movement being pushed on their kids to the extent that the schools are even trying to hide information from parents, giving instructions to children as they tell children that they can make life-altering decisions such as chemically castrating themselves or physically castrating themselves, irreversible processes, things that will force them to conduct regular medical procedures on themselves for the rest of their lives while not being properly told that what that actually means and the consequences of it, and while being told to not tell your parents they're being told this stuff.
I know a school mom who's put in prison for 5 days simply because she wouldn't leave the school until they gave her that written reason why they were quarantining her healthy daughter. They even handcuffed her 16-year-old daughter.
Main takeaway from your story stories that this could happen to anybody at any time. So with this, I suppose, do you think it was designed to intimidate parents and people like you from standing up against what you see to be clearly something that's happening that's obviously wrong?
Absolutely. The judge even mentioned in our sentencing that she was making an example of us to dissuade other parents from doing what we did. She also is holding us accountable in our sentencing for mean things that strangers said to the principal, which totally outside of our control. I mean, we had people say mean things to us. So the whole thing is just kind of ridiculous. We're being sentenced harsher because of things that were outside of our control, the things that we didn't do, to be set an example of, not for the crime, but for political reasons.
Yes, I think that's completely accurate. As you said, it's a class 3 misdemeanor is similar to a traffic fine, and you're not going to be dragged through the court system for 8 months and be sent to jail for something like that if it wasn't to pull you up and say, look, here's what's happened to Jennifer.
We got to be showing up for each other. Yep. We got to have each other's back, because that's the strength of America. There's a brave lady right here.
For all of us.
Welcome to the Handcuff Club. We've been waiting for a few more to join us. and I have a trial coming up in August. So Jennifer was arrested before I was. She was a customer at Viva. She became a friend. I'm still in touch with her. They ended up moving for work, but it's unreal because she went to prison for 5 days. She went in courageous. She came out traumatized. My oldest son went through Corrections Academy, and he told me the things he saw. And even though she did that time, there's a warrant out for her arrest. You know why? Because she refused to write a letter of apology to the principal and the judge who put her in this position. That's obscene. That's obscene.
And like she says, I'm doing this to make an example out of you. Mm-hmm. Okay. I got just a barrage of opinions and criticism here. And there too, what you talked about earlier. I'm getting targeted by the FBI. Oh, so the FBI is going after parents now. Not going after guys who are robbing banks and going after guys who are planning terrorist attacks and mass shootings. No. We're going to go after parents.
I'm telling you, Michael, I know one of the guys who consistently threatened to kill us online, everything else. The FBI was in my shop talking to me. I said, are you going to do something about it? They didn't do anything. Tucson police went to his house, knocked on the door. He said, I didn't do it. And they said, oh, okay, good for us. That's fine for us. He ended up suing me. He sued a candidate for state senate. He sued some private individuals. The guy who threatened to kill our family sued us. Fortunately, we had insurance, and Viva Coffee House Insurance funded a lawyer. And the judge told us privately, he said, I shouldn't be saying this, but there's no way he's going to win this. The guy's nuts. So my insurance company said, well, instead of going through court, it's going to cost us less just to offer him something. So he got $2,500 for threatening to kill my family. And do you think the FBI's done a thing about it? No, because I'm supposedly the domestic terrorist. You saw what was sent to my house. That's terrorism. Threatening to slaughter someone's family and make them watch. How am I a terrorist? Because I stood up for kids, because parents got a little angry because they're selling our kids for blood money. It's despicable.
And now we're a couple years removed from the things we were going through with COVID, and you have been vindicated over and over and over and over and over. You don't have to sell your story. What needs to happen is a big fat apology coming from Pima County, coming from the Biden regime, who had to pardon themselves out the door because they knew they were guilty, including Dr. Fauci, which Woody Harrelson put out 2 days ago, saying it was an undescribable evil that was perpetrated on humanity. And we want apologies, and like you're saying, little restitution. We need to reset the clock here from
restitution, absolutely. And if you can imagine, we moved to another state for months. We had a couch that looks out the front window. A truck would pull up, a car would pull up. My wife would have a panic attack thinking it's someone coming to arrest us or serve us with a lawsuit again. And it's like it's Amazon or something. And we're still healing from that. I'm a strong guy, but I have episodes where I just have these anxiety attacks because it is PTSD on a level that's, it's going to take a long time to get over this.
This stuff is egregious, and our family has taken so many hits. There are times we've been near despair because it's been really difficult, but we've refused to give up. I told my wife, what's left of our home equity money, we're going to lose it in this fight. It's going to indefinitely put off our ability to get back into a house. And my wife, without even thinking about it, said, this is more important.
You know what?
We are in this to go the distance.
You know what? This is infuriating. It's absolutely infuriating because we have terrorists coming across the southern border. We have illegals coming across the southern border, and they're giving them all kind of assistance. They're giving them money. They're giving them health care. They're giving them housing. But you, us, parents, American citizens, they're trying to crush all of us, trying to destroy all of us. This is the most disgusting thing ever.
We're not the only family, although I've had so many people tell me, Kelly, if even one of the things that happened to you happened to me, I would have folded, you know.
I completely agree. It's infuriating. You know, just the massive abuse of power and just the plot. We know it now. It was a plot. You know, when people start to get violated, as you have been, okay, there's going to be a reaction. And I go back to what Peter Schiff says, the elite and those in charge just don't fear the people. We have no respect for them whatsoever. We're going to keep doing this until there's enough blowback, until enough people say enough and they actually do something about it. Then the fix is applied. Then you start to see a shift. And I think this election proved it, but they're playing possum. They're going to be back.
And some so-called Christians, and I know this bothers Eric Metaxas a lot. If you haven't had a chance, read Letter to the American Church and then his follow-up book, which escapes me right now. But, you know, people take these views and it's escapism. It's passing by on the other side and not being the good Samaritan. They say, oh, well, God will handle it all. God's on his throne. What's going to happen is going to happen. I heard people say, well, this is the end times. What are you going to do? Well, you know what? Enough people fought back to where we've been spared that judgment, at least for a time. And as Eric Metaxas says, you know, if you're saying it's the end time and you're doom and gloom, it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. But don't forget Nineveh. Don't forget all the times God has relented because people have been righteous. And what is that righteousness? It's to defend the fatherless and widow. It's to visit people in prison. It's to do all of the things that we've been doing. And I don't take credit for it because I'm not that good of a person. It's the Spirit of God where you cannot ignore this. You feel what people feel. And if you're not doing that, if you're keeping your safe, tidy little world and you're not helping, you're not getting involved, you are going to not do well in the judgment. Read Matthew 25, where Jesus separates the sheep from the goats. What is that distinction? People who are going to be with him in eternity and people who are going to be separated from eternity.
Yeah.
When I was in prison, did you visit me? When I was naked, did you clothe me? This is very serious stuff. This is what Christianity boils down to. Are you your brother's keeper? Yes, you absolutely are. You cannot stand by while people are suffering injustice and do nothing and be self-protective. Cowards are going to be judged.
Yeah, we've talked about this subject on our show over and over and over again. If you don't do anything, okay, the Antichrist eventually will just come in and you'll bow down. You'll just go along to, I'll go along to get along. And the next thing you know, you're taking the mark and you're just going to be a part of the system. Even though you had good intentions before, it doesn't matter. You'll just bow down to that pressure. And then we know what happens to you if you take the mark of the beast. So no, you got to speak out.
War isn't over.
You got to use your rights. Yeah, go ahead.
We won a major battle with the election, but the war isn't over. I worked for Mike Lindell until recently. They stole the down ballots. They're trying to keep the machines because they know as long as they have the machines, they can game the system and they can get their power back. And that's why Elon Musk has said we need to get rid of the machines. If those machines are in place, we don't have a future because they stole down ballot races. They stole Senate races. Yeah. Guys, you got to wake up. If you're in lethargy right now, you know, the golden age, we're there. We are so back. No, we've won a battle, but it's like Babylon was celebrating and Persian stopped a river and went under the city where that river provided the water supply when they were celebrating victory. And that can happen to us.
Absolutely.
We need to be very careful not to celebrate too hard and stay sober and stay in the fight.
Kelly, we're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us here at the best of times and worst of times. It's all at the same time. We are going to continue the fight. I want to encourage everyone here on Rumble, share the show, get involved in this information war. Kelly, where can they find you?
Just go to realfreedomtalk.com. That's the hub for everything. You can see shows that I've done, articles I've written. I would really love it if people would subscribe to Freedom Talk Magazine. It's just $5 a month. That really helps us out. I started Freedom Talk Magazine because I realized the long-term battle is to win back the hearts and minds of people, because the Marxists have infiltrated our educational institutions, our family, our entertainment, and we have to provide a counter narrative that's telling the truth. That's if we're going to overcome Marxism. So go to realfreedomtalk.com and subscribe to Freedom Talk Magazine. We've got Eric Metaxas, Dinesh D'Souza, oh gosh, a whole bunch of people. And that Peter McCullough is in the March issue, which is all about make America healthy again. So awesome. We appreciate the support. If you'd like to donate, givesendgo.com/freedom talk. I'm not going to lie, this is taking everything we have. I don't expect anybody to donate, but if you feel like that's something you want to do, we're still in this fight.
Awesome. Well, very good. Fight on, brother. You are doing a phenomenal job. And all of you who are fighting in the information war that we are in right now, fighting for the Republic, it is meaningful. We still have souls to save out there. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, please keep your ear to the ground and your eye to the sky.